Crisis Radio. This is your host, Webster Tarpley, reporting from Washington, D.C. This week we're dealing with a solemn occasion of tragic proportions and with the most sinister overtones. The long process of the seizure of power by the Wall Street puppet, Barack Hussein Obama, Barry Soetoro, constitutionally unqualified for the presidency, not a citizen, not born in the continental United States. This process of seizure of power now reaches its culmination, and the nation leaps into the abyss. We are now adrift on the sea of adventures, with a Congress determined to impose the Mussolini fascist corporate state and a president determined to show his loyalty and serviceability to Wall Street. In this terrible situation, who can speak for the American people? The American people, duped, terrorized, lied to, miseducated, intimidated. Who can speak for the American people? Is it the Wall Street Party, the one that wants renewable energy, that believes in the new myth of global warming, and that strives for the fascist corporate state? Clearly not. It is the minority party, the low-wage, sweatshop, reactionary, imperialist, militarist, neocon party, recently discredited by many years in power? Clearly not. So others will have to try to speak for the American people. And I will try my best to express some, at least, of what I believe to be the overriding interests of the American people at this point. What would a real president say in the inaugural address next week? What would a real president say in the State of the Union address soon to follow? A real president, I would submit, would have to say something like this: My fellow citizens, I speak to you at a time of acute national crisis. We face the perspective of a world economic and financial depression of incalculable severity. It is a crisis without end. It is an abyss without an exit. We have just had the worst unemployment report since 1945, with more jobs lost now than since the demobilization after World War II. Our real rate of unemployment must be approaching 20%, although this is masked by the statistics of the Department of Labor. We are currently losing jobs at a rate of about 500,000 per month, with indications that this rate is accelerating. Especially hard hit are the few remaining productive jobs in areas of real, tangible, physical production, in areas like the automobile industry, the aluminum production industry, and other forms of heavy industry. Every one of our states is now undergoing some kind of a budget crisis, led by California, which has a $60 billion hole in its budget. In addition to the skyrocketing rate of unemployment, our unemployment insurance funds are close to exhaustion. In Michigan, 1 out of every 8 people, 12% of the entire population, is now living on food stamps. And these funds, too, are dangerously close to being exhausted. We must now think of emergency action to save human civilization itself and to ward off genocide from the American people. You know, or should know, that up to 40,000 people a day die in this world of malnutrition, starvation, and diseases that can be cured for just a few pennies, like diarrhea and related ailments. That so far has been the life of the third world. Under this economic depression, there is a clear and present danger that these forms of genocide will now encroach into the United States. And as your president, I must do everything in my power to prevent this. As we survey this scene, we must say that the free market, private enterprise, and the current banking and business leadership have failed. They have struck out, and we cannot afford to give them any more strikes under this situation. It is therefore imperative that emergency action be undertaken in the tradition of how presidents have dealt with previous crises. The measures that I begin to outline for you now are all conducted under the aegis of the Defense Production Act, the Trading with the Enemy Act, and other precedents from World War I, World War II, and the Cold War. I also appeal to the inherent powers of the presidency, the implied powers of the presidency. The Constitution is not a suicide pact, and we must therefore have the ability to do what is necessary in a speedy way. I invite the Congress to revisit the measures that I now announce, but I assure the people that the legislative logjam and the incompetence of the current leadership around Pelosi, Reid, Boehner, and McConnell will not be allowed to generate casualties here on the home front if people are foreclosed on and freeze to death under bridges in this terrible winter. We are dealing with a banking panic. The banking panic began in 2007. It is similar to the banking panic that faced Franklin D. Roosevelt when he was inaugurated at this place in March of 1933. On that day, every bank in the United States was effectively shut down, and the economic heart of the United States had ceased to beat. This time around, the banking panic began in 2007, in the summer, with the countrywide bank panic run. This was soon followed by Northern Rock in Britain and Ireland. In 2008, panic runs have caused the demise of banks and investment banks such as Bear Stearns, American International Group Insurance Company, Lehman Brothers, and indeed Citibank. At the end of 2008, in a supremely ill-advised move, a bailout of these bankrupt financial institutions was stampeded through the Congress with the help of the Republican candidate McCain and, above all, of the Democratic candidate Obama. They are therefore co-responsible for the disaster of what has come to be called the TARP, the Troubled Asset Relief Program. Even so, under the TARP, Citibank has gone bankrupt for a second time and has had to be bailed out for a second time. Bank of America, after being bailed out under the TARP, has now gone through bankruptcy in effect in the last 48 hours. The evolution of the stock price of J.P. Morgan Chase suggests that it cannot be far behind. Trillions of dollars have been injected. Something on the order of $8 trillion or more have been injected into the banking system. Nevertheless, the banking panic continues. The lesson of history is that once the panic run has begun to undermine a speculative bubble, there is no power in the universe that can maintain the fictitious, unrealistic, bloated, and speculative values of paper promises to pay. And this cannot be our concern. We must turn away in our economic thinking from the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the NASDAQ, the Standard & Poor's, and other purely financial indices. We must begin to think about industrial production, freight car loadings, truck loadings, the average longevity of our people, the infant mortality rate, the rates of incarceration, the amount of calories in the diet, and other indices of real production, tangible physical wealth available to our people.